Ms. Wendell, can you hear me okay?
I can, Mayor. Thank you.
I call the May 6th, 2026 Assembly Finance Committee meeting to order. Ms. Wendell, will you note the roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. We have all Assembly members present in chambers besides Assembly Member Atkinson and Mayor Weldon, who are available on Zoom, and Assembly Member Hugh Scandies has not yet joined us.
Thank you. That brings us to approval minutes. You actually have minutes as supplemental materials to the April 1st Assembly Finance Committee meeting. Any changes to those minutes? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I haven't had the chance to review them. I would ask that maybe we postpone approval until the next meeting.
Would you like to make that motion?
I move to postpone approval of the minutes until the next meeting.
Any objections? Seeing none, we will postpone those and you all can review them in the meantime. That brings us to agenda topics. Agenda topic 1 is service reduction follow-up. My intent here is to go through this memo by memo and see what questions you have. We do not need to take action on service reduction prioritization tonight. We don't need to have a lot of discussion about that. The idea will be next week, we will start looking at that service reduction list and start winnowing it down. But tonight is an opportunity to get more questions answered now that staff have provided us some more information. So I am just going to run down the list here and we'll go through each memo. The first is a Parks and Rec overview. Staff, anything you want to say to this memo before we jump into questions?
I don't believe so, Madam Chair. In fact, I think on all the memos, it would just be up to the body if you have questions.
All right, any questions about the answers to the questions on the pool and field house? All right, I am not going to remember what my questions are, so we will keep rolling. To the city museum memo. Any questions on this? I do remember my question on the city museum. I know this information we've had a variety of memos on the city museum. This information is somewhere, but in the list of service reductions, we have an estimate for closure of the facility. Oh, I can't, not gonna find, is the spreadsheet in our packet?
The spreadsheet is not in your packet for tonight. It was presented on April 22nd if you have your larger budget book with you. And we do have the ability to put it up on the screen if that's desired.
All right, I think I got to the area I need. So my question is about the amount for full closure, divest collection, and divest building. This in the spreadsheet, it says 479,284 would be the operating savings. And I was unsure about whether that is was a average between two assembly members' estimates, or do we know what that number is? Because it's not, there is a an estimate here of what it would cost in our memo to reduce salaries, which is 460. And then this one is 479, and I had a higher number in my head. So curious if staff have estimate on what the savings to general fund would be, or operating budget for full disclosure, divest collection, and divest building.
Madam Chair, if I could have just a minute to access some information. Madam Chair. I think because there have been multiple memos and multiple angles taken at this, that there are different numbers floating around. The number that's presented in the budget summary is not intended to represent, the 479 is not intended to represent an average. But I believe that hails back to a prior memo that had been provided to the assembly on in a Friday report that we then consolidated and provided. However, looking in the budget document, I'm going to hand it to Mr. Barr, who has that right in front of him.
So for FY 27 in the manager's budget, we propose $566,000 of general fund support to the museum. So in a full closure divestiture situation, my assumption would be the savings would be close to that amount, although we would need some of that amount to do the work of divestiture.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the memo and, there was something about reducing programming at the museum. I guess to confirm, or maybe some info to get back is to reduce programming, is most of the savings going to be from actually like cutting a staff position? I mean, I'm sure there's maybe some commodities and supplies, but most of the savings for reducing programming is by reducing staff. Is that correct?
Mr. Smith, that's correct. The option that we had in the April 22nd packet included a reduced programming option that saved $261,000, and the lion's share of that 95+% of it is related to 2 FTEs-ish.
Thank you.
Mayor Weldon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hopefully you can hear me okay. And I apologize for everybody that I'm not there. Unfortunately, I've come down with a crud that everybody's had lately, so I don't want to spread it. So, and I would like to see, since we're still not dealing with this totally, what just holding the collections. So I'm looking at a curator of collections, that position. And I don't know if they might need a little bit of administrative staff to run volunteers to do very limited hours. If we could come up with that scenario for our next time, I would like to see that.
Is that clear enough direction to you guys?
Yes, we can do that.
Mr. Steininger?
I'm looking in this memo, it talks about the just cost of just maintaining climate control, fire suppression in the building at about $5,800 a year. How confident are we in that number? That seems low. Like that seems like just slightly more than like my home.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Steininger. I did not dive into the detail of that question personally, but I have a lot of confidence in the individual who developed it. So I would say high confidence.
And maybe a follow-up on the previous memo from Parks and Rec, there's kind of a table at the very end that talked about kind of 3 different levels of shutdown of a facility. That 5,800, is it kind of safe to assume that sort of fits into that level 3 full shutdown, kind of higher risk, higher reactivation cost type of concept? I know that's, a Parks and Rec concept, but trying to apply it to other facilities. Is that kind of a safe assumption that it's in that highest level shutdown?
Mr. Steininger, I think that's a safe assumption. I'll note, and there's a thought, the last sentence in that paragraph that talks about the 5,800. It's worth just calling out that that doesn't include costs that we might incur when damage occurs to an unoccupied building. So
Ms. Wendell?
Thank you, Chair Wall. I would just like to note for the record that Assemblymember Hugh Scandies has joined on Zoom.
Thanks. Any other thing on the city museum? Okay. We will move on to, and for Ms. Hughes Candy, since you just joined us, we were just walking through these service reduction memos one by one to see what questions people have. The next one is overview of the 340B hospital drug pricing program. Any questions on this memo? Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the memo, it was talking about the need to effectively execute the program, being able to offer pharmacy services through Bartlett. Could you speak a little more to what would be involved with getting something like that going?
thank you, Mr. Brooks. Yes, I can to some degree. So 340B implementation requires a whole number of things. It's a very complicated program to implement, but a key one that we don't yet have at the hospital is outpatient pharmacy services inside the hospital. So building, constructing a pharmacy in the hospital is what needs to happen there. I'm grateful to see Mr. Warner just joined. He can correct me if I get anything wrong. But that's a big hurdle that the hospital would have to overcome for the CBJ Health Fund, which includes the hospital, CBJ, and the school district admin portion of the school district to benefit from 340B. It is possible, and I believe the hospital already benefits to some degree for 340B in other ways, but specific to the context of this memo, the major hurdle, or at least one of the major hurdles that would need to be overcome, is that construction of a pharmacy space inside the hospital and then managed and run by hospital employed pharmacists.
Mayor Weldon, the Miss Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since this will be complicated to implement, I'm wondering if we could just do a slight implementation instead of doing everything. Because I think where the savings comes in after talking with Mr. Barr is people that need to use really, really expensive medications. Can we do it such a way that it's outpatient plus those individuals, or do we have to be all in?
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I don't think that the type of implementation that you're envisioning is, well, I think it is possible for the hospital in a kind of interim process before it has a pharmacy built to have contracts with external private pharmacies to fill that role. In that scenario, only the hospital can benefit from the 340B pricing program, is my understanding at least. So it is possible to do an implementation of this program in our health plan benefiting the hospital directly through contract pharmacies. That's not exactly what you're asking for, but that's the only way to kind of feather this in, is my understanding. And then once the hospital has that on-site pharmacy run by its own employees, then the health plan could benefit, but not until then.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
But if we benefited the hospital, then we could give them some other things that we're currently paying for if they're making enough money, right?
Madam Mayor, the Assembly can do many things with 5 votes.
Miss Hall.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that inpatient is already implementing this program. Well, maybe that's not, but anyway, speaking, doing a little more research in this today, this would expand the program to outpatient. So, say a patient's being discharged at 10 o'clock at night, has a prescription to fill, instead of having to, wait till the next day, they could get it filled right there on campus. Is my understanding that would be one benefit. And the second part of this would be, it would allow the hospital to contract with the manufacturers and distributors at a discounted rate that then would be passed on to the patient as well as our health plans. Am I getting that right?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Hall. On the second piece, the way, and we may want to look to Mr. Warner for some of this because these questions get a little bit outside of my expertise, but my understanding of how the 340B would work for us is that the hospital would receive would receive drugs, certain types of drugs that qualify under the program at significantly reduced costs. And then how those benefits get allocated on is somewhat of a policy call that the hospital board and ultimately you as a body would make.
I'll jump in here. I read, and then we should invite Mr. Warner up here for questions. And my question might be better directed to him, but when I read the letter that had come from Bartlett, I think what I read was the cost savings can't be passed on to the city. They have to stay in the hospital. But I think listening to you, you said that's a policy call. Is that a discrepancy in opinion, or am I misunderstanding the situation, which is also very possible?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's complicated. So I think where we align on opinion is until Bartlett has a pharmacy, if so in the scenario where Bartlett is only working with contract pharmacies, the benefits to the program can only go to Bartlett. Now, the mayor made a point earlier about we could ask this hospital because we own it to do lots of things, and that's a policy call that the assembly can make, and has conversations on just this past year. Think about the 3.1 substance use disorder programs and that sort of thing, community health sorts of things. But as far as 340B is concerned, under a contract pharmacy model, the benefits can only accrue to the hospital. If the hospital has, in a future scenario, an on-site pharmacy that is run by its own employed physicians, then the hospital could engage in a contractual process with our health plan administrator to such that the benefits could go to the health plan, of which Bartlett is about a 50% contributor to, CBJ is about a 50% contributor to, and the school district is a de minimis contributor to right now anyway. So that's that future scenario where my past memos and current memos speak to the benefit accruing to the whole CBJ, not just CBJ, separate from the hospital and the school district, but all. And I think our opinions align on that concept. But when you invite Mr. Warner up, if they don't, you will learn quickly.
Mr. Warner, will you join us? Thank you for being here. This group might have questions for you, but maybe just if there's anything you heard that you wanted to provide more detail on or didn't agree with, speak.
I would just start with saying this is a super complex process that is heavily regulated. And so HRSA does audits on these programs on an annual basis, and they'll come in and they'll go down to the patient level. And so there's systems that we have to have in place. You have to have contracts in place. So a lot of this work isn't going to be done with on-site talent that we have today. There's specialists we'll have to bring in, contractors to set these programs up. And then we work with those as we kind of develop these programs. Predominantly what was said is accurate. The CBJ would benefit in this end stage when we have a contract, when we have our own pharmacy and we're able to contract with the CBJ with the goal of reducing, and we have to structure it in such a way where we're reducing the cost to Bartlett, and that's the benefit. And then you guys would benefit as a co-beneficiaries in that process. But then, I mean, there's a lot of steps along the ways and lots of little contracts we have to get in place to make this work right. Yeah. this
That's
is
helpful. Thank you.
Simpler simplification of a super complex process.
Well, it was simple enough for me to understand it, so that is good. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Warner. So I guess with what you just said right there, or is Bartlett like actively looking at how to implement this and also considering implementing it over time in a way that would be beneficial to like the CBJ health plan?
It's something we've talked about. So to be honest about it, the first step in this process was getting a primary care clinic, which we only opened in September. So that was the first key. And then we have to have it go through a designation process, and it has to be classified as right clinic. And so that would be the second step, which we're working on today. And then once we have that, then we go into contract pharmacy, and then we start going down the steps to eventually our own pharmacy. Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for joining us. Does the pharmacy have to be owned by Bartlett in order for those kind of benefits to be carried over to the health plan, or can it just be on the campus?
The pharmacy would have to be owned by Bartlett, yes.
Ms. Hughes Candies?
There was kind of two answers to that question, I guess.
Go ahead.
Does it have to be on campus? There's additional benefits to it being on campus, as such as late night discharges and getting those pharmacies out, staffing efficiencies. But technically, pharmacy does not have to be on campus for this to happen. It has to be owned, yes. Not technically on campus, though.
Go ahead, Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Warner, thanks for all the information so far. I think I've got a good sense, and what I understand from your answers is that this is a super complex process, but we're, step one, we've checked, and then getting it certified. Sounds like we're on process for the next step to check. So is it your understanding and the hospital board's understanding currently that the direction from the assembly would be to work with the city and pursue this path? Or are you currently in a position where you feel like you need clearer direction for you to undertake those steps?
I'm of the opinion it falls within the scope of my position to try to move this forward, because these would be operational decisions. They're not policy decisions from the board. And so these are like typically a 340B program isn't a board decision. It is an operational decision. I think it's well within our current guidance and power that we can move this forward. And I think we're trying to do it as expeditiously as possible. It's just we have to do it right too, because to do it wrong, could be massive penalties.
Great. Thank you for that. Thanks for your work on it.
Anything else? Ms. Hall?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wall and Mr. Berner. At any of the other hospitals you've been affiliated with, have they had this program, or, are you familiar with the side of actually running one of those programs?
I've been at hospitals where we ran 340B programs. We've gone as far as contract pharmacy. I've never been at a self-insured hospital, like such as we are, where we'd have these additional benefits. So I've never had to explore this option. We have a pharmacist director on staff who has done these in the past to others, so he has knowledge. And so we've kind of leaned on him a little bit to get this going.
I had Mr. Steininger, then Mr. Brooks.
So since, if I heard correctly, you said this is something that kind of falls under your purview as a CEO of the hospital, without direction from the assembly or the board, something you could pursue. And so I guess my question is, absent these conversations we've been having about the budget, is this something you would be pursuing anyway, even if we weren't weighing in on the concept? Is it something that you think you would pursue just from your management perspective of the hospital?
Yeah, and I think in my letter I've indicated that we've had multiple discussions. I think it is a monthly talking point in my meetings with Katie and Robert at this point. It's just keeping them apprised. It is a slow, steady process. Yes, it's something we've been working on.
Mr. Brooks, then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I can definitely imagine that, there's a lot to the process, but could you just give us a rough guesstimate of what a timeline of implementation and maybe costs associated with startup would look like?
That's a tough one. So there's going to be a pretty big swag. My best guess is it takes 2 years conservatively to get this stood up. Because just all the contracts and all the work we have to do and the timing of the different programs, if I'm going to be totally honest. Costs are a tougher one to gauge. I can't give you a good estimate of what it costs to do renovations. There's different variables too, external versus internal to the hospital. Internal to the hospital will be the most expensive option because we have probably the most expensive space due to regulations of all the CBJ facilities. External, it's a little bit laxer because you're not meeting Part B hospital regulations. It is pharmacy regulations. So, but then you give up some of the benefits as well. I don't have a good answer on cost. Sorry.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. It's possible I missed this in your answer to Ms. Hughes Candy's earlier. It is my understanding you said that you have full operational authority to go ahead and implement this by yourself. Of course, though, it seems like it would be a little more complicated to build the on-site, or I guess not necessarily on-site, but to purchase a location or build a location for the pharmacy. Do you feel that you would have the support of the board in doing that?
I guess I go back and restate that. I do not have the authority to obviously build anything. But as we look at contracts and setting up the 340B, that is something we do today. We've had contract pharmacies in the past. That piece and getting a lot of the paperwork and the operations is within the scope of my position. Anything that we do that's external, that would be obviously capital expenditure, would be board approval. I have talked about, my board knows about this. We've chatted about it. It's just, we're not quite to the stage decision point on that yet. Yes.
I'm going to keep us moving since it looks like this item will not impact our FY27 budget. So thank you for being here and answering our questions, and we'll keep moving forward. Okay, that brings us to the next memo on sales tax revenue diverted to utility projects. Any questions from the body on what is presented here? Everybody did a great job on the memos. Keep going. Oh, Mayor Weldon.
Sorry to screw you up. I was wondering if the utility board had weighed in on any of these scenarios as one that they preferred over the other.
Madam Chair, I think City Manager Kester is online and might know the answer to that question.
No, they have not, though they are generally favorable of any assembly decisions that support utility infrastructure. So they haven't been asked this specific question.
Anything else on utilities? All right, there is a memo here on general fund travel and training. I know I've got a question on this one. Anyone else have questions on the travel and training memo? I will ask mine. Manager Kester, in my reading of your budget letter, I believe that travel and training budget for some departments was kept flat, with some departments was reduced, and in your all your work to significantly reduce our expenses this year. Can you give me an estimate on how much travel and training has already been reduced in the budget from last year?
I will let Adrian pull up that number while I just confirm that, yes, we did take a careful look at travel and training, while understanding that it's important to provide that professional development for our employees and as a means of recruitment and retention. And I do think Adrian has the, sorry to put you on the spot there, Ms. Wendell, but you probably can find that number easier than I can.
I'll ask a follow-up while it looks like Ms. Flick has something
I
for
don't have
us.
the exact number yet, but I do want to say the number I'm about to tell you is not an FY '26 to FY '27 comparison. It is a reduction to the requests made in the '27 budget. And that magic number, 46,500 was reduced.
Can you repeat again what that, I thought I was following what that number is?
So I'll give you an example. When I built a finance budget, I said, here's all the training I really want my staff to go to this year. There's good reasons for that. It was more than my '26 budget, and I reduced that per our process. And so the 46,500 represents amounts that were reduced out of budgets. Some of that was to be flat to the prior year. Some of it was discussion about what the traveler training was, and a decision was made to move it. So it's not exactly like a year over year comparison.
That makes sense. Can we get that number, or is that too complex? If not right now, then at some point.
We could, yes, we could look at what's in the budget in total for training. I don't know that I could get it to you from a what's required and what's not, as we do all of our training request by person or by position. And so it's just tons and tons of data to try to put side by side and compare.
Go ahead, Manager Kester.
Thank you. Chair Wall, just so I understand your question, I think you're just asking how much did the manager reduce the overall travel and training budget in FY '27? And that is a number that is in your packet. And the perils of travel is I did not bring my giant binder with me. So that number was provided, the year over year travel and training budget numbers was provided, I think 3 meetings ago. If that was indeed your question.
I am seeing the page where that information would be, so I will go back and look at it.
For the record, it is in the April 11th meeting. It was a supplemental handout that was at that budget retreat. So it doesn't have a page number at the bottom. It does have lots of green and red.
Other questions? Mr. Steininger.
I see a sentence here, and I think I understand it, but just want to confirm. Within these three categories, the middle category, $550,000 of training that is not required. When I read the paragraph, it sounds like some of that cost is associated with actual commitments we've made. So while it's not required, it would be going back on a commitment we've made to, you know, some external organization or support organization that we have. Is that an accurate read of that? Do we have an idea of how much is not related to a commitment?
Mr. Steininger, we did not look at the data through that lens because, as an example, I serve on a standing committee for the GFOA. That's a 3-year commitment. Part of that commitment is attending 2 events in person every year. And so if indeed there was a desire to say, nope, if it doesn't get you a certification, we're not doing it, then I would need to tender my resignation to that committee and no longer participate, as I would not be going to those events as committed. We did not look through all of the travel and training with that lens. We really looked at it through what's required in order to function in the job, either because certifications are required or types of work can't be done unless you can't drive a bus unless you have a CDL, things like that.
All right, seeing no other questions. Next memo is on administrative department admin support. Any questions on this memo? Seeing none, we have a cat license memo. Any questions on cat licenses? I do. Okay, so again, if I'm following maybe my question is, whose job is it to set dog and cat licensing requirements? Is it ours or is it JAR's? Because my understanding is like, we don't see that revenue anyways, is what do we say you have to do this and they decide what that costs and take the money? Or, you know, if this is a cost to the city, kind of how do you, or, you know, potential savings to the city, how does that work with what's like in JAR's authority?
Thank you, Chair Wall. So ultimately, ultimately the Assembly is responsible for providing animal control services. So ultimately, it would be the Assembly's decision as to how to provide those services and what to require, what not to require, what rates to charge, those sorts of things. JAR is our contractor that we use to provide those services, and it is we certainly do in this case. It is typical in similar relationships that we look to that contractor to provide recommendations and expertise to these sorts of questions. I spoke a little bit to JAR's perspective in the memo. But ultimately, it is the Assembly's decision on whether to do this or not, what rate to charge for it at different levels. There's different policy calls that you might make around rates associated with you know, the type of behavior that you might want to see, whether or not people spay and neuter their cats, whether or not cats are allowed unattended outdoors, and those sorts of things that you could influence through policy discussion around this topic or rate setting around this topic.
We don't like take action necessarily. The license doesn't sit with us. We don't like take action on that, but we can influence our contract with JAR. Is that a good way of putting it?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Mayor Weldon, then Mr. Steininger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the 1.5 million FY27 on animal control and sheltering. I thought we were only providing money for animal control, and it seems like 1.5 million is a lot of money. And I thought they did fundraising for the sheltering piece. Am I incorrect in that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is an area where the manager's office differs in opinion from JAR, and I will try to be fair to both. So JAR would assert that the 1.5 million, or JAR has asserted in the past during contract negotiations that the 1.5 million is solely for animal control purposes. It is my belief as the negotiator of that contract that 1.5 million covers both animal control and sheltering services, and we simply differ in opinion on how those costs are allocated.
Mr. Steininger.
Thank you. I'm looking at this, 25% estimated compliance rate for dog licensing. And I'm wondering, are JAR's animal control, officers or staff, are they empowered to, write a ticket that's binding if they discover an unlicensed dog? Is that something that goes on? I guess, how is it enforced currently?
Thank you, Mr. Steininger. Yes, JAR's animal control officers are empowered to cite individuals for not complying with our animal control code that they enforce. And they are supported both by JBD and the law department.
Anything else on this memo? All right, we have one more here for service reductions, which is on the Douglas Fire Station lease. Any questions on what is presented here? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess just to confirm on this, if we lease out, I guess the real savings, or I guess earned revenue, is really just going to be that $9K a month. And then you mentioned, or in the memo, there's some possible impacts to equipment and shorter lifespan of equipment. But should we just lease out the Douglas Fire Station? I mean, it's looking at should be like 10K a month, maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We gave that a WAG, but yes, that's our WAG estimate for lease revenue after caring for related landlord expenses.
Thanks.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trying to tie this a little bit to the travel and training, is there any opportunities to bring any degree of training and conduct it out of that facility to, for any type of first responder services within the community?
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. We actually do a fair amount of bringing trainers, the fire department rather does a fair amount of bringing trainers to town rather than they also send staff out as necessary, but where possible, they're particularly good at bringing people into town to train large groups, large teams, and they usually need larger spaces than this particular space. They'll commonly use classrooms out at Station 3 or in Station 1, or when larger spaces are needed, larger spaces outside of the fire department. But this particular space, I would say, isn't large enough for those types of uses.
All right. I'll just get a quick temperature check because I can suggest process here, but you guys ultimately get to decide how we go through things. Are people feeling ready next week to start going through our list of service reductions and, prioritizing that list in terms of which things are still on the table as we think about the FY27 budget? Or can you be ready by next week? Mr. Smith.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And would that be for final action, or just to kind of maybe sift through and say, okay, here's where we have 5 votes to consider this, and
My proposal would be that next week we would basically take a series of votes to what goes on the pending list. And so the idea would be, if this is something you might consider, depending on how the other votes go, let's get it on the pending list. But anything that you know you're never going to consider, or, you know, you have all the information you need, basically gets put off the list. Does that make sense? And, you know, things can come off and on the list anytime up until we take, you know, final action. But the idea would be to, both for us, staff, but also for the public, to really know what, you know, which of these ideas are we thinking about for next year. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I very well could be more than ready to have that discussion by next week, but I'm just curious, you know, do we want to focus on that as the first thing, or kind of get into what we all might support as avenues for the foregone revenues, and you know, maybe get into that a little more in depth before talking necessarily about cuts, because that might change the atmosphere of it.
Absolutely, Mr. Brooks. You 1000% reading my mind. The order of the agenda for next week would be to start with foregone revenue for that very reason. Ms. Euskandis.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I'm looking at the schedule right now and I want to make sure I'm tracking because I agree with Mr. Brooks. I think that, you know, certainly factors into the discussion of cuts once we know a little bit more about revenue. But the idea would be that at the end of the 13th, we're ending up with a list of items that we know generally are kind of more in order of support, or things are like we know when we don't have 5, and then the 20th would be where we're taking votes for finalization. Is that correct?
To
I
start
don't
with
want to
your
restate, or like I don't want to. I want to make sure I understand. So
yeah, no, this is good. That's a good question. To answer your second question first, yes, the 20th would be when we would be making, you know, final decisions. I'm using air quotes, which you guys can't see, on final decisions, because of course the full body at a regular assembly meeting on June 8th makes the final decisions. But the idea would be on the 20th, we are trying to get 5 votes for what that final budget looks like. And then the 13th would be basically selecting the items that we would be discussing on the 20th. And so what I would suggest on the 13th is we don't spend a bunch of time arguing about $20,000 versus $40,000 for a particular item. We take an average, or, you know, whatever amount we have, we say, we want to talk about a pool next week. And maybe I won't vote on closing a pool, but I might vote on, I'm not talking for myself, I'm talking hypothetically right now. But if you say, I might need to cut a pool if we don't cut something else, so I want to talk about it on the 20th. I know no one wants to cut the pool.
that's very helpful.
That's a
Thank you.
bad slash
No.
good example.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. It's the universal possibility that
Yeah.
may need to get enacted on the 20th.
Yep.
Thank you.
This is just my suggestion, and you all can rebel against it tonight or in the middle of us trying to do it. So any other feedback on that concept? Okay, sounds like we have a loose plan. Okay, looking at the time, I'm gonna, just because I think the next one will take us some time too, I'm gonna give us a short break here, unless if that's okay. If we could take, I know I need 5 minutes before we jump into the next agenda item. Right, I'm gonna bring us back. That brings us to proposed managers increments. Manager Kester, is this you or? Go ahead.
Think you're all just tee this up. We have relatively few managers requested amendments to the budget. The first one is an increment of just over $100,000 for prosecution services for our public defender contract. This contract did increase. We didn't have the final results back to award that bid when the budget was drafted. So we used an estimate and the bids came in higher. So that is why we needed that increment. The body, although you guys talked about decreasing that service, right? Decreasing prosecution from CBJ law, the indication was that you would move forward with that service. So if you move forward with that service, you would need to include this increment. The second proposed increment is to fund the emergency shelter on Thane year round. Again, this decision was made by the Assembly after staff presented the manager's budget. And the third request is something much newer to you, and that's a request from Gastineau Human Services to help fund their rehabilitation services. And you do have a memo from Deputy Manager Barr on that, and I would punt to him to cover that topic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the memo that you have for me is somewhat complicated from a numbers perspective, and I strove but failed to keep it on one page. But the long and short of it is that Gastineau Human Services has reached out to you with a request for funding for their substance use disorder 3.1 services program that you probably recall because the Assembly relatively recently talked about this when that program was transitioned from Bartlett to GHS. GHS's operational needs, operational support for their 3.1 program is primarily provided by Medicaid. They bill what's known as the 1115 waiver program for their clients who are Medicaid eligible, I think the vast majority of which are. And the Medicaid reimbursement rates, as is typical, I've never known an organization in the medical field who bills Medicaid who claims that Medicaid covers 100% of their costs. It just simply doesn't appear to exist. At Gastineau Human Services for the 3.1 program, the Medicaid billing covers 93% of their costs, which is pretty significant. That's high in my view. And their request from you is for a grant to cover the remaining 7%. The reason why they're asking for this now is because the state of Alaska has decided to change how they have historically funded GHS and other organizations like GHS through the Comprehensive Behavioral Health Treatment and Recovery Grant Program. That grant program has for many years covered the operational needs of GHS for this program and other organizations similar to GHS that provide services like these statewide. The state, for a variety of reasons, has decided to repurpose that grant program and change it to be competitive grants to support adult and youth and another type that I'm blanking on, behavioral health need programs, but competitive grants that I don't know much more about what they're doing other than that, because while they've indicated that that's the direction they're moving in, they haven't released the grant applications or kind of the details about how it's going to go, other than definitely having communicated with those organizations that they should expect stepped down funding. So in FY27, they're getting 25% of what they've annually received in that grant. And in FY28, I believe they'll get 15% and then none after that going forward. I also understand, so GHS's request for this $247,000 from you is one time. And that one-time nature is based on the state also saying and planning to engage in a re-rating of the 1115 Medicaid waiver rates. I think GHS's hope, and our hope too, is that the re-rating effort that the state will go through will result in rates that do cover GHS's needs for this program. I am personally, professionally, like the manager's office, like CBJ, we are very dubious that that will turn out to be the case. So I would caution you to think of this as a one-time request, although that is the request that GHS is making. I'm just not I'd be surprised if the Medicaid rates changed in a way that covered all the costs of this program. If they do, that would be fantastic, and I'd love to be wrong. But I'd be surprised. So that's I was about to say the long and short of this. I think it was just the long of it. But happy to take any questions if you have them. Thanks.
Questions on any of these three proposed increments? Ms. Hall?
I just have a question now. Is it my understanding that these are actually federal funds that are being restricted and thus causing the state to pull back?
Thank you for that question. It's an excellent one, Assemblymember Hall. These are federal funds that are passed through to states. And I believe the state would say that these changes that they are making are changes that they must make per federal guidelines, requirements. Yeah.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Barr, when we've first, considered this idea, I feel like I asked Mr. Swinton, but was it expected that we would be needing to provide ongoing support for this program? I mean, I realize things have changed, so I'm just trying to, has it changed? Anyway.
Yeah.
Because of this.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Smith. It was not expected back in the time that you are remembering that any sort of operational support would be needed. The Assembly was asked for and did provide kind of startup support, which was needed and utilized.
Ms. Hall?
There's no one else. With the, in the memo, it states that half of the patients served are search beneficiaries, although because we're a non-search provider, we're not able to be reimbursed for that. Am I getting that correct? And if so, is there any avenue to appeal that or try to get that changed?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So you are correct. I'm fairly sure what I'm about to say is accurate. I'm not. There's people in the audience that might be able to correct me. Those individuals, GHS still receives Medicaid payments for. They simply don't receive any additional support beyond what they would normally receive from those individuals by virtue of them being search beneficiaries. When search provides those services to their search beneficiaries, they do receive full, my understanding, again, they do receive full because they have a different funding source than the 1115 Medicaid waiver program. But because search doesn't provide that particular service in Juneau, it does fall to GHS. We have not asked search if they would be willing. GHS may have. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but CBJ has not asked search if they would be willing to support GHS. But that is something that we could do.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. this may be a question for GHS team themselves. I guess my kind of general question is, I see, you know, they started this service to fill a need in the community, which very appreciative of. It now has a slight it has a deficit, or, you know, it's revenue is not covering costs. I guess I'm kind of curious, like, I can see that. I'm just also wondering, does the program, does it provide other benefits to recruitment for staff that they have? Anyway, they can better utilize staff or utilize space, or I guess I'm just kind of wondering, is it a true just full, you know, $247,000 like pure minus, or anyway, just as we're trying to like evaluate how to best support and provide support. But anyway, I guess that's kind of what I'm wondering about. But I also see there's a negative $247,000 sign on there. So maybe that's, you know, financially that is the loss. But that's fine.
Is that information you'd like them to get for us? And
I could chat with them at some point,
Okay.
maybe. Yeah.
sounds good. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I can do a little sleuthing and go back in time. I think quite a bit back in time in our packets, but I'm wondering, Mr. Barr, do you have a sense of magnitude of scale when GHS took this from the hospital? The hospital had a dollar sign associated with a loss for rainforest recovery, and I'm wondering how, if you remember, I know you are not the hospital person to know. So do you have any sense of what that number was or how this compares?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Hughes Candies. I wish I could give you something more accurate. The best I can do off the top of my head is that it was a big number, bigger than this one. Sorry, I can't be more specific, but I can do some homework.
Nope. Yeah, that's helpful. That was my recollection as well. And then maybe I can chat with staff to try to hone in on what dates those were and go back in time in packets.
I've got a question. Is GHS the only provider of this service in Juneau? I've been assuming yes.
Yes, they are.
They're nodding their heads. Thank you. Ms. Hall.
So one more question. In the memo, I'm seeing there towards the bottom, another possible funding source or service partnership opportunity could exist through direction of support from BRH as previous owner. Could you speak a little bit more to, you know, is that something that's been explored or?
Thank you, Assemblymember Hall. We haven't explored that in detail. What that sentence is alluding to is the Assembly's policy setting role as the owner of the hospital. The Assembly can direct the hospital to provide community support in various ways, and the hospital or the Assembly could you know, direct the hospital to provide funding support for these services if it wished. But staff have not explored that with hospital staff.
Seeing no other question. Oh, do you have another? Mayor Weldon said she'd get us started with a motion. Go ahead, Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to amend FY27 budget to include these three items, with additionally the gas on human services item would come from the opioid settlement fund.
Any objections to the motion? Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. So is the mayor's motion to move these to the pending list, or are we taking action on them right now?
Her motion is to take action on them right now to include them in the budget. Again, we can't take actual action until the whole thing goes through on June 8th, but this would be to not put them on the pending list. That is her motion. One could put them on the pending list. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I am objecting just to express my desire to continue exploring alternate funding sources for the GHS funding piece. Certainly, I appreciate knowing that that funding source is there. You guys have heard me talk about this in the past. I want to, at the very least, do a little bit more exploration of what it would look like for Bartlett to support this financially and talk with Bartlett staff about how close to their comfort level that would make them feel. If that was something that was viable, I personally would prefer that to the opioid funds. And again, the simplest high level reason for that would be this is using funds to do something that we have always done and to make sure that continues to happen. And if that ends up being what we use them for, that's great. But the whole purpose of those funds and the whole purpose of that settlement was to do additive services in communities, not to use it to free up other funds. I think because, as you pointed out, and as we all know, there's still a lot of room coming up in meetings to make switches for funding sources or switches to the budget before it goes through. I don't need to object, but maybe I want you all to be aware of that in concept, because I'm going to explore that and may try to swap that one's funding source out at a later meeting. And I can remove my objection with that.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I am interested in the results of Ms. Hughes Gandy's exploration. And so I would move to amend the mayor's motion to approve the first two items, but to send Gastineau Human Services to the pending list. And that way, after, if Ms. Hughes Gandy's can explore that option further, then maybe we have another solution. So that's my amendment.
Any objections to the amendment? Ms. Hall.
I do need to declare that I'm a member of the St. Vincent Board, and however, I have discussed this with the city attorney, and my participation does not constitute a personal or financial conflict, and so I will not recuse myself unless you deem it necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. We are, go ahead, Mr. Steiner.
While we're declaring conflicts of interest, I'm a member of the Finance Committee of St. Vincent de Paul. Similarly, my participation does not constitute a personal conflict of interest.
I didn't see any objections to Mr. Kelly's amendment. Seeing no objections, that is so moved. That brings us back to the original motion as amended. Any objections? All right. That is approved. This brings us to CIP amendments. Ms. Flick, is this for you? Go ahead.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Madam Chair. This starts on page 23 of your packet tonight. As part of our normal process, you're going to hear this again on the next item. The capital improvement program was introduced to you. You've had time to have that sit with you. Sometimes staff have amendments that we need to bring to you. This year we do not, but we wanted to ensure that there was kind of a time and place for the body to make any amendments to the capital improvement plan. And you will actually see this again on May 20th when you forward that resolution to the full assembly for action on June 8th. So this is not necessarily your last bite at the apple, but we wanted to make sure we had a good time for this. Because we're working through the service reduction conversation, there were a handful of items represented in that service reduction that are also tied into the capital improvement plan. And so those items have been called out in the memo for you just for convenience. Again, you can tackle those tonight. You could tackle those next week with service reductions. You have a lot of options before you. So the recommendation is that you have discussion. If you have amendments, we can tackle those. If you don't, you can also move that along without any other action. Thank you.
All right, so questions on either what we are doing tonight or any last questions about the CIP? I know we have had time to ask questions already, but Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question's in regards to the Affordable Housing Fund contribution reduction. And my question is, how much do we do annually a year? I'm trying to see how big of a hit 200,000 is.
Thank you for the question, Madam Mayor. I can tell you the I can tell you what's in the FY27 manager's proposed budget. I think Ms. Wendell is looking up prior years if you like that as well. In FY27, there's in the manager's budget 1.5 million going into the Affordable Housing Fund. That's broken up into 750,000 of sales tax, 469,000 of hotel bed tax, 160,000 of interest, and 143,000 of loan repayments.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to confirm, if, for instance, a 1% sales tax CIP was removed from the CIP, so the funding was removed, those funds would go into the unrestricted general fund.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Smith.
Okay.
That is correct. If you decide to amend the capital improvement plan, taking a project off of it, not replacing it with something else, that funding source would fall to its rightful place. Most of these are sales tax. So in the case of the 1%, yes, it would fall to the general government fund balance that we've been looking at over the course of this budget process.
Thank you.
Mr. Brooks and Mr. Steininger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the draft CIP list, it's showing for FY27 in the Affordable Housing Fund, $750,000, and then FY28, the 1.1 million, and then FY29, $750,000. Can you speak to why, the spike up in FY28 and not, I would assume that would be for loan repayments, but then in FY29, it goes back to 750. So just a little clarification on that, please.
Mr. Brooks, are you looking at the allocation? Yes, thank you. You're looking at the allocation of the 1% sales tax. And as engineering and the group that put together that ballot initiative looked at how to allocate funds across various projects, that is just how the funding fell within the amount they expected to receive every year, and the other projects that might be more bound by a project cost.
Mr. Steininger. I had your name written down on my piece of paper. It may have been from a long time ago if you didn't have a question.
Yeah, I do. Sorry, I don't know why you caught me off guard because I knew I had a question. So looking at these, I guess three projects here that were listed on our service reduction ideas. So if we elected to remove these from the FY27 CIP list, and this answer might be different for each of them, should we expect to see those come back in the FY 28 capital improvement plan. So would be removing them, just kind of shift them in priority by a year? Or will we not see these projects for, a much longer amount of time?
I'm going to assume that Manager Kester would like to answer that one.
Thank you. Without having the 1% in front of me, but it sounds like Assemblymember Brooks does, the 1% schedule is kind of what governs how we appropriate funds. And so in my recollection, the Lemon Creek multimodal path is not scheduled for any additional funding. So it does have over $1 million in it, and we've been actively pursuing kind of planning grants for it. So it is a bit of a stagnant status, but does have what we feel like is funding to be able to pursue some grant opportunities. If memory serves me, Gastineau Avenue is scheduled in next year's 1% as well. However, if we are looking at reductions to scheduled CIP projects because of reduced revenue, that would be the type of project that I would look to not bring you in the draft CIP. So while it's scheduled, it also could easily be a victim to our new reduced revenue situation without any change in circumstances.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to piggyback on that a little bit, I do see that it doesn't have any further appropriations for the remaining years, but then there's the future column, and the future column says 15 million. And I just, want to make sure that with these CIPs, just because we have a large number in the future, is that binding us to something?
No, it is not. However, it should be used as a reflection to what we think that the estimated cost of the project is. And I think you're referring to Lemon Creek multimodal path. We think that's going to be a relatively expensive project, which is why it's always been our intention to pursue federal multimodal transportation grants for that project.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I didn't either ask this earlier or get it, queued up, but I did have a question. The remaining funds in Jackie Renninger Park project, do we know are they intended for more planning? Anyway, I'm just curious to know if anyone has a general sense on what they may be planned for, and I can totally understand if you may not have the answer.
Mr. Smith, I think I do have the answer, and I also think I have individuals listening who may text me if I get this wrong. But I believe the remaining funds are intended to get us through design and get us to a bid-ready project, which we would then be looking to find capital funding from in some way. My guess, predicting the future, risky business, right, is that eventually the PRAC would ask for general obligation bond or some other type of bond related funding for construction. But I believe the funds that are remaining are intended to get us the rest of the way through design.
Thank you.
Mr. Brooks and I were at the PRAC last night and we asked this question, and I'll just add a little nuance to Mr. Barr's answers that was similar, which is we are at 35% design. Eventually we'll have to get to 100% design before seeking larger funds for the actual project. I've got a question. I'm in a similar vein, this didn't pique my interest until it ended up on this list, but Gastineau widening and turnaround, could you give me the reminder of purpose and status of that project? Ms. Kester.
Thank you. Yes. So that project was recommended by staff for the 1% when the Gastineau Avenue Apartments project had been approved for an affordable housing loan. There was, I think, some general acknowledgement about how tight and congested the area is there. The CCFR has a very difficult time getting up into Gastineau Avenue, and they do have a large number of calls up there. So something that they have long identified as a need, and just with additional development there, need for additional on-street parking and kind of reducing congestion up there. I do want to emphasize that a turnaround and a widening of Gastineau Avenue does not satisfy the fire marshal requirements that there's an ingress and egress into a subdivision with 100 dwelling units or more. So while it would have certainly helped the situation and still will help the situation on Gastineau Avenue, it's not enough of a relief according to the fire marshal building code rules to not require that additional access point.
Mr. Steininger.
I guess I'll just follow up on that to ask if this project went forward, would that mean that the fire trucks would no longer have to back down Gastineau Avenue when they leave from a call?
Honestly, I think at this level of feasibility, it would be difficult to tell you that, because this truly was like we should throw some money onto the 1% to try to address this problem, and cost estimates have ballooned since then. So we've done no design work on that to be able to tell you like exactly how much space. I can tell you that certainly was the original intent.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. And it's all right if you don't have the answer handy to this, but it seems to me if that wouldn't provide the needed egress, have we looked at that as an alternative, and have we priced that out instead?
We have not priced it out. However, we recommend engineering and public works, and the manager's office strongly recommends against developing that egress and continuing Gastineau Avenue as a public project. The reasons are it's not our property, so we would have to acquire easements and acquire property. It's ALNP property, or AJT, I believe, which is their sister corporation for land holdings, and some private property. It also would be very disruptive to the slope, and we have lots of concerns about slope stability in that area. It would also be very difficult to maintain. There's a kind of mudslide almost annually down on that back of Gastineau that the neighbors usually can manage and hasn't been catastrophic, although other mudslides certainly have been up there. So we just don't, from an engineering perspective, it's certainly possible, but not a very cost effective to develop that second access.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to have Mayor Weldon get us started with a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would move the full CIP to the Assembly, and I'll show you how this is done, because I'm going to object for purposes of an amendment.
Go ahead.
I would remove from the CIP and put on the pending list the restricted budget reserve as, now I forgot, 2 point something million.
Yes, I think if you look in your CIP, there is a item where
It's on
Yeah,
page 26 of your packet.
Yeah, 2,720,000, and it's, yeah, page 26.
would be moved into the restricted budget reserve. And so Mayor Weldon is taking that item off out of the CIP and putting it on the pending list for a future decision. Page 26. Any objections to that motion? Go ahead, Ms. Hall.
Excuse me. I think I need a minute to digest what we're doing here. And Addie's, please, may I have an Addie's?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
All right, we are coming back. We have a motion and we have an amendment. Any objections to the amendment to send the to remove that CIP item and send it to the pending list? Seeing none, that's so moved. Other amendments? Ms. Hall.
And I would amend the original motion to remove the 1.5 million for the Lemon Creek multimodal path from our CIP list.
Any objections? Mr. Kelly.
I think I can amend that. I would move to amend that to, instead of just removing it, to send it to the pending list.
Any objections to the amendment to the amendment? Mayor Weldon, do you have a objection to the amendment to the amendment? Go ahead.
Yes, we're gonna have to make some tough decisions, so if we keep punting all these to the pending list, I think they're just gonna make our decisions harder when we get there, so I would agree that's not something that, I'm gonna fight over right now, and I think it should be removed from the list.
I will support, sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Hall.
To speak to my amendment, this is federal funding that was offered under the Biden administration, and I don't see this coming back as an opportunity for maybe a decade. And I just, I think it's a great project. We would all love to have a bike path from down to the valley to downtown through Lemon Creek, but I'm just being realistic, and I don't think we should be putting money into this project that is very unrealistic that we'll be able to complete it anytime soon.
I'll speak in support of the amendment to the amendment. I think I have, I would like to see this project funded. We don't have everyone else in the room here, so this could come back in our budget process if we have enough votes to make that happen. And so I would rather make that decision at a future date. Any other comments? Okay, so we had an amendment to remove this completely from consideration and an amendment that would put that decision on the pending list. And so if you vote yes on this amendment, we'd be, just to be clear, it would move it to the pending list. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the amendment to instead of removing the Lemon Creek multimodal path from the CIP, add it to the pending list instead. Assemblymember Kelly,
Yes.
Mayor Weldon,
No,
Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
I think she has exited.
she's still online. Assemblymember Hughes Scandies. We'll come back to her. Assemblymember Atkinson,
Yes.
Assemblymember Brooks,
No.
Assemblymember Hall,
Nope.
Assemblymember Steininger,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies, do we have you? No? Okay, Chair Wall.
Yes.
Motion passes. The amendment to the amendment passes 5 ayes, 3 nays.
Great. So that brings us back to the amendment as amended. So the motion we are voting on is to put this item on the pending list. Do we have any objections to that amendment? All right, seeing none. That is so moved. Other amendments? Mayor Weldon.
I'll just go down the list. I move that we put the gas on Whiting and turn around to the pending list, because that seems to be what everybody wants to do.
Any objections? Seeing none, that is so moved. Go ahead. Mayor Weldon.
I move that we put the remaining funds in the Jackie Renninger Park project to the pending list.
Any objections? Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to object just, I know that we don't have the funding necessary to do that project, but allowing them to maintain those funds for design will allow them to pursue other avenues for getting funding outside of taxes. So I'd like to see that remain.
I'll also object for similar reasons to Mr. Brooks. This one, I know how I'm going to vote, so no reason in my mind to punt. Any other comments? We have an amendment and we have objection. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll? Oh, Mayor Weldon.
Can I speak to my amendment? Or,
Yes.
so I think this is a great project and everything, but when we're looking at cutting stuff we already have, it seems not worthwhile to keep funding a project that we know we don't have funding for. And yes, I've already been approached by people and said we could do a general obligation bonds for Parks and Rec. And yes, we could, but we have to keep we may have to keep our bond capacity for other things that like Escobar's and stuff instead of just Parks and Rec.
All right. We have a motion and we have objections. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the amendment to the motion to move the remaining funds in the Jackie Renninger Park project to the pending list. Mayor Weldon,
Yes.
Assemblymember Brooks,
No.
Assemblymember Steininger,
No.
Assemblymember Hall,
No.
Assemblymember Smith,
No.
Assemblymember Kelly,
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
No.
Chair Wall.
No.
Amendment fails, 1A, 7 A's.
Mayor Weldon, are you still going or?
Yep, I can just do the next one. I move the Affordable Housing Fund contribution reduction of $200,000 to the pending list.
Any objections? Mr. Kelly?
I don't need to speak on it.
Anyone else? All right. We have a motion and we have objections. And again, this is just for anyone following. I know the assembly is following. We are not making decisions. We are deciding which decisions we want to talk more about in the future. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you. On the amendment to the motion to move the Affordable Housing Fund contribution reduction of $200,000 to the pending list. Mayor Weldon. Can you,
Sorry, my finger stayed on that button. Yes.
thank you. Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly,
No.
Assemblymember Hall,
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
No.
Assemblymember Brooks,
No.
Assemblymember Steininger,
Yes.
Chair Wall.
No.
Amendment fails, 4 A's, 4 nays.
Are there any other amendments that people want to consider now or on the pending list on the CIP? All right, seeing none, that brings us back to the original motion as amended. Any objections to moving the CIP forward with the changes that we outlined? All right, seeing none. Nice job, folks, moving forward. Are people good about keep continuing to roll? All right, that brings us to marine passenger fees. Ms. Flick.
Thank you. I will kick this off. I believe Director Pierce is online if we have specific questions for her. This section starts on page 31 of your memo or 31 of your packet. Sorry, it's been a long day. Similar to the CIP, you have received the proposed funding for the passenger fee plan. In the packet, Ms. Pierce outlined a few things of interest. You have the full list of requests that came in, which is a duplicate of what you saw, I believe on April 1st is when we talked about this last. You also have both in your packet and in the supplementary materials, additional public comments that have come in. And similar to the CIP exercise that we just went through, the staff's recommendation is part of the manager's proposed budget. So if there are no changes, there's no action required that would move forward as part of the proposed budget that ultimately you'll take action on May 20th with other amendments as you work through your process. So if you want to make amendments tonight to the passenger fee plan, you can certainly do that. If there are no amendments to make, it can just go forward as is in the proposed budget.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Are we ready for questions? Okay. Thank
Let
you.
me make sure, Ms. Flick, were you done?
I am done, ready for questions and
Okay.
for actions.
Go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I was noticing in the memo on page 32, it mentions that if we did want to add anything that we would need to be deducting from the CWalk line item, would you be able to explain why that would be necessary?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Kelly. As with all funds, we want to ensure that we don't expend more than is available. And so the proposal that Director Pierce prepared utilizes most of the funds that would be available in that fund balance. And so depending on what tweaks are desired, we would need to reduce something else that's budgeted to fund something that's not been in the proposed budget.
Would it be possible? I think I saw in the budget that there was some fund balance to that. Would that be an alternative source?
Yes, so actually in your packet on page 77, as part of the general fund budget, we have included at the very end the list of other interesting fund balance that the Assembly Finance Committee often has questions about. And so you'll see the hotel bed tax, the affordable housing, the tobacco tax. But then in the restricted, you'll see the Marine Passenger Fee Fund has $591,000 as the anticipated ending FY27 fund balance. And the Port Development Fee Fund, which is a combination of the port development fee and the state marine passenger fee component, is expected to have $344,000. So we generally don't like to push those to zero. Because we are basing our expenditures on anticipated revenues. We like to have a little bit of capacity should revenues not be exactly what we estimated. We don't want to fully expend and produce a negative fund balance.
Mayor Walden.
I apologize, my question was answered.
Any other questions? Mayor Weldon, would you like to start us with a motion?
Certainly, Madam Chair, I move the marine passenger fee list to the full assembly. And I would object for purposes of an amendment.
Go ahead.
And my amendment is to remove item 11, waterfront covered shelter with restrooms. I know Docks and Harbors has been waiting on this for a bit, but I don't think we're going to have the money in it now because a couple of my other amendments, you'll see that we'll add some money back. So I don't think we're quite ready for this yet. So that is my amendment.
Objections. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I guess I don't need to speak to it. I just object.
Any other objections? Mr. Smith.
Can I I'm going to object for the purposes of a question. Back to the maker of the motion. Madam Mayor, what were you saying that you want to remove it because, sorry, I didn't capture that
I want to
sentiment.
through the chair, sorry. I want to remove it for two reasons. Number one, I don't think we're quite ready for it. I still think we're trying to look at that plaza and see what we're gonna do with that plaza. And number two, I think we're gonna have to add back, funding for the AJ dock and the, Franklin dock, later on, so.
Ms. Hall.
Check for a question for the maker of the motion. Is this funded through the Dock Enterprise Fund?
Maybe staff can answer that.
I can
Ms.
answer
Flick?
that. So the, if I'm looking at the chart correctly, I think this project is 3.5 million. This is coming from the marine passenger fees, so it's not through the Docks and Harbors Enterprise.
I will speak in support of this motion, though for slightly different reasons than Mayor Weldon. I think that it's a little, I know they've been planning for a while. I still think it's a bit premature to move forward. I think we have a lot of questions still to answer about the future of the City Museum, and I know we have deappropriated funding that was going to go to do that in the short term, to move it to the waterfront in the short term. But I'm not, until we have those discussions about the City Museum, and I'm not ready to let that idea for the future die. And if we move forward with this project, that opportunity will be gone. So I would, if we decide to not fund this, I would put those funds towards the Seawalk, so we can keep moving more resources into that project, but we can deal with that about what to do with those funds if we see others support this. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, just an objection for the purpose of a question. I don't know if, now is the appropriate time or when it gets moved to the full assembly, to consider some of these outreach things, because it seems by some of the emails received from different service providers that there can be operational savings associated with changing the public Wi-Fi and downtown internet service. And I was just wondering, is that something that should be, try to be done within an amendment now or at another point?
Mr. Brooks, I think that if you have changes to the appropriations in the marine passenger fee, tonight would be the night to try to make those. That ideally, again, you all can do what you want, but that would be the idea. So once we tackle this amendment, it would be a good time. All right, we have a motion and we have objection, I believe. Yes, from Mr. Kelly, we have objection. Any other comments? Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Item number 11, waterfront covered shelter and restrooms from the passenger fee proposal. Mayor Weldon,
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly,
No.
Assemblymember Smith,
No.
Assemblymember Hall,
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
No.
Assemblymember Brooks,
Yes.
Assemblymember Seininger,
No.
Chair Wall.
Yes.
Amendment fails, 3 ayes, 5 nays.
All right. Any other amendments to the CIP? I saw Mr. Kelly first, and I also saw Ms. Hall and Mr. Brooks for the future.
Before I make my amendment, I think I do need to ask one question. I just want to confirm that I'm reading the memo, understanding the memo correctly, that if we did want to fund the full crossing guard services and not make any sort of deductions about the uniforms and the other part of that, that the amount at the bottom of page 31, $626,844 would be the new amount.
Ms. Pierce, will you speak verbally instead of nodding?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, that is correct. And I apologize. I was nodding as I was confirming what was in my memo.
No worries.
Thank you. I would move that we raise the amount that we're providing to the crossing guards to $626,844 and remove that, take that out of fund balance instead of the city walk.
Any objections to that? Mayor Weldon.
Thank you for that. I just think that dealing the 626,000 is too much. So I like the staff recommendation of 614,749. I don't think these people need uniforms necessarily because they're wearing reflective vests anyway, and JDC has already built in money to pay for some of their staff already into it. So I'm having a hard time with the 614,000 already, so I don't want to make it any higher.
Other comments? And again, Ms. Hall did a great job demonstrating for us. If you need time to process and get caught up, totally legit to take an Eddie's. We got a lot in front of us. I will go ahead, Mr. Steininger.
Just a clarifying question, maybe you stated that, so that it's increasing it by what, $12,000. Is that accurate? Is that the motion?
Correct. Yeah, approximately.
Mr. Steininger.
And a follow, and really that $12,000 is just for these equipment and uniform pieces. That's the only difference between the two funding levels. I think that's a question for you, Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Steininger. That's correct.
I'm going to speak in opposition to this amendment. When it comes to this level of minutia, I like to trust staff's recommendation who've spent time on these things. Thanks. All right, we have a motion. We have an objection. Ms. Wendell.
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the amendment to increase the crossing guard program amount to $626,844 and fund it from the passenger fee fund balance. Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Mayor Weldon.
No.
Assemblymember Smith.
No.
Assemblymember Hall.
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
No.
Assemblymember Brooks.
No.
Assemblymember Steininger.
No.
Chair Wall.
No.
Amendment fails, 2 ayes, 6 nays.
I believe Ms. Hall was next on the list for potential amendments. Oh, did we vote on it? Oh. I believe we just voted on the amendment. And so I had a list of people who had other amendments and you were on it. If you're ready, I think Mr. Brooks also had one if you're not.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
So I move to amend the marine passenger fee request with the addition of 75,000 for the Downtown Business Association Ambassadors Program and make this a always on on our list unless we're requested otherwise from them, and I ask for unanimous consent. And if you'd like, I can speak to my amendment.
I'd say go ahead.
Yeah, this has been funded through the marine passenger fee historically, and reviewing the minutes from last year, we agreed to fund this program last year, which is this year the only request from the DBA. It has been a successful program in helping our visitors, provide support to them outside of the visitor center. And it's a successful program, and I see no reason not to fund it. There was some confusion on the submission of their request, which did come in at the appropriate time, but may not have been seen right away. So anyway, some confusion, and I think it should be on the list, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Objections? I'm going to object for a question. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Okay. I'm going to object for a question of Ms. Pierce. I may have already asked this in public, but I forget the answer. Am I correct in remembering that, the reason this was not in your recommendations was not related to the timeliness of the application? It was for other reasons. Is that fair?
Thank you, Chair Wall. That's fair.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. Could you tell us what those other reasons were? Sorry, just so I'm totally aware.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. In staff's understanding of past direction from the Assembly was to do consider this as one-time funding. And so it was not included in the budget. This is similar to the funding for the private docks, which was also directed by the Assembly to do as one-time funding. So it was not included in the staff's budget. It is certainly within the Assembly's purview to add it back into the budget. I hear Ms. Hall's amendment, should it pass motion loud and clear, that if it is chosen to be funded, that will put it in the budget for future years. There was some confusion over the timing of the amendment. There was also a timing of the submission. I apologize. It's very late where I am. I also would add that we weren't confused over the timing or the submission not showing up because the DBA had stated that they weren't planning to request CBJ funds this year. So staff was under the impression that that also included passenger fee funds. So mix of previous Assembly direction and some miscommunication on the DBA side between staff and DBA.
Mr. Steininger?
I'm going to object, and not necessarily because I don't see the value of the ambassador program, but because I have questions that I wanted to ask about the ambassador program that I didn't ask because it didn't come to us as a request. And that really revolves around what I see kind of as a bit duplicative with some of the visitor center services that we have through Travel Juneau, especially seeing the changes there, providing paid staff. I think this might be an opportunity to reduce overhead and have kind of all of these visitor information, visitor guidance services provided by a single entity. And so I guess to that end, I'll object for an amendment to amend the motion to direct the funding to Travel Juneau instead of the Downtown Business Association.
All right. We have an amendment. Mayor Weldon?
I appreciate Mr. Steininger's comments, but I would object to moving it to Travel Juneau. I think this is one of the DBA's biggest things. So I think we should support them. I may follow up with an amendment for less money, but we'll see how this one goes. But I don't think it should be moved to Travel Geno, as DBA is the one that's has done this for a while.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess a question for the maker of the amendment is, is Travel Juno open to executing the Downtown Ambassador program?
That's a good question because the Downtown Ambassador Program didn't come to us when we were having additional discussions on this. I don't think there's been quite as much time here. I guess I'm putting for this amendment to try and craft this into something that I can support adding into our marine passenger fee budget. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Yeah. So there would be logistical questions, certainly.
Ms. Hall.
And I appreciate the amendment, but I think this would be a better discussion next year versus this year. You know, the request did come from DBA. It didn't get included in our list initially, but then was brought forward. And I think, yeah, it does sound like it would make sense to have all of those downtown visitor support services under one umbrella, but that should be a discussion between the DBA, Travel Juno, and JEDC. I would see as, so this year I would oppose your amendment. Thank you, or object to.
All right, we have an amendment to the amendment and we have objections. Ms. Wendell.
Thank you. On the amendment to redirect the $75,000 of funding to Travel Juno instead of the Downtown Business Association. Assemblymember Seininger,
Yes.
Mayor Weldon,
No,
Assemblymember Smith,
No.
Assemblymember Hughes Candies. Oh, apologies. Assemblymember Atkinson,
No.
Assemblymember Kelly,
No.
Assemblymember Brooks,
No.
Assemblymember Hall,
No.
Chair Wall.
No.
Amendment to the amendment fails, 1A, 7 A's.
Brings us back to the original amendment to add the ambassador program grant to DBA into the marine passenger fee budget. I don't remember if we have an objection. I'll object. The reason that, this wasn't in the budget was because of discussion that the assembly had last year about the program and its benefits and its expenses. And, I just think of all the things we do. This is lower on my priority list. All right, we have a amendment and we have an objection. Ms. Wendell.
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the amendment to add $75,000 for the Downtown Business Association Ambassador Program as a recurring expense to the passenger fee proposal. Assemblymember Hall,
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly,
Yes.
Assemblymember Steininger,
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
No.
Mayor Weldon,
yes,
Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Assemblymember Brooks,
No.
Chair Wall.
No.
Amendment fails, 4 A's, 4 nays.
Mr. Brooks, I believe you also had an amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will try to make this as cohesive as possible here. I would like to make an amendment to the of ending the contract with the current public service or public Wi-Fi service provider and using the operational expense to pursue a contract with Snow Cloud. And I can speak to that amendment. From materials provided, it appears that the current contractor, North River IT Services, hasn't completed the coverage zone that was proposed in the original submittal. And for an operational cost of 700,000 plus a year, it appears that we have another local company that can get the comparable equipment and the full range coverage implemented relatively easily. And then they're showing an operational cost annually of $200,000, which can result in a $500,000 a year savings that can be then used in other areas that are for marine passenger fees. So I think it would be a worthwhile transition to have some savings and a little bit better service on that end.
Mr. Kelly.
Madam Chair, would, if I wanted to have staff bring back some more information before I decided on this, would it be appropriate to send this to the pending list instead?
Yes, that would be a appropriate motion.
I move to refer this amendment to the pending list.
Any objections? Mr. Brooks.
I don't need to speak to the objection.
Mr. Steininger, do you also have an objection
Just
to
a
the?
clarification of what we're now voting. Is this an amendment to Mr. Brooks's amendment, or is it?
Yes.
Simply, okay. So then we would still vote on the underlying amendment after we vote on your amendment to the amendment.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will also object. I feel like we have all the information we need to make this decision. I mean, or I feel like I do. So staff have worked hard on bringing us solutions to this problem, and this gets into operational weeds that I don't think we should get into. So I wouldn't want to talk about that in the future, or you know, and I won't support the motion either way. We have Mayor Weldon.
This is a question, please. This is either directed to Mr. Barr or Ms. Kester. Try to make this simple. If it's getting too far in the weeds, we'll just, hopefully it'll go to the pending list. Why did we pick the one entity over Snow Cloud? I don't remember the entity's name.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to answer that question. I think I might advise that, in my view, this might be an illegal amendment. I think Attorney Wright is listening if you wish to seek legal advice. The whole thing.
Through the chair, that was one of my questions, because it seems to me we can't just suddenly switch from a contract to somebody else.
Mayor Weldon, you are hard to hear.
I said that was part of my question, is I wondered if it was illegal to switch from a contract with somebody to a contract with somebody else.
Is our attorney online to answer Mayor Weldon's question?
Chair Walsh, she is.
Sorry, I heard my name. I was transitioning over. So I think I'm answering a question at this point. Is that correct?
If you heard the question, yes.
So I didn't hear the question, but I have been receiving some texts, and I heard the original motion. So it would not be legal for the assembly to cancel a contract and designate a different contract. It would violate our finance codes and how we issue contracts and what we do. If the assembly would like more information about what that process is, how somebody was picked, how they were scored, I can tell you in this situation, there was a process, there was an appeal, there was a decision made by the appeal board, there was a decision made by the manager's office. We can walk through that, but an amendment to cancel a contract would not be legal.
I'll go to Mr. Brooks and then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Ms. Wright. What would be the proper avenue to achieve what I'm trying to go for here? Because I'm just looking in the materials provided, and it seems that the bidding review board sided with the appeal, but the original applicant was given the contract anyways. And so I just want to know, what the next steps would need to be in order to try and reassess that.
Yep, it's a great question. So, and that is what happened in general. So that contract with Snow Cloud has a limited duration, and I am happy to go back and look. I don't remember off the top of my head how long that contract was, or what the provisions were for ending the contract early. Often contracts do have provisions that allow us to end them early if there is a reason. So I think the appropriate motion would be to ask staff to bring the assembly information about that contract going forward, and whether it is a good economic decision to rebid it or go with a different contractor in the next round.
Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just provide a little bit more context. So it is accurate that the bidding review board decided against, as Mr. Brooks indicated. The manager's office made a decision contrary to that, to award the contract as originally awarded. And the result of that disagreement was that the decision came to the assembly, and the assembly made a decision in line with the manager's office's recommendation. So it did not end with the bidding review board. It ended with the body making that decision and concurring with the manager's office recommendation. That contract is a 5-year contract. We are about to enter year 2. So just context around that. And it followed our standard bidding process with independent scoring by professionals in their field. Happy to go into more detail at a future meeting if that's requested, but I wanted to provide that additional context.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Let's figure out what to do with the motions on the table first. So right now we have an amendment to an amendment. I can't just take it off the table, even if.
Right. I
So
can
we're gonna
help
start with the
that.
amendment.
I'll move to withdraw my amendment to the amendment.
Mr. Brooks.
I just want to make sure, regardless of how the vote turns out on this, and it might be something that needs to be covered in some kind of other meeting or format, but what happens when a recipient of one of these bid awards doesn't produce what they said they would in their proposal, and how is there accountability or recourse for that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the material in your packet, I would characterize as highly one-sided. I would not agree that the contractor is not performing what is required. In the event that a contractor is not in complying with their contract, the contract usually has stipulations about how to remedy or care for that, but it is not, in my view, the case for this particular contract.
Mr. Brooks.
So the service area that was proposed is what we have now.
Largely, that is true. It is not entirely as proposed, but there have been a whole host of series of events that have influenced how that project has evolved over time.
Mr. Brooks, are you planning on keeping your motion to cancel the contract or to change the contract on the floor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can reword it to make it less illegal, I guess.
Maybe if you're going to reword, just take it off the table and make a new
Yeah,
motion.
I'll remove that amendment and propose a new amendment to have staff review the contract with the current public Wi-Fi provider and bring us back a report with potential alternatives and ask for unanimous consent.
I believe that is a legal motion, but I'll just double check with Ms. Wright. She is nodding her head.
That's correct. That one is legal and you can certainly vote on it.
Objections, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Just to a question to the maker of the motion. Is it your intention that this would be referred to specifically to this finance committee, or is there another committee or full assembly that you would refer it to?
Thank you, Assembly Member Kelly. I think it would be appropriate information for finance.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have objection to the motion? Mr. Smith.
I guess I understand. I mean, I think all of us here have had longer history on the topic, on the project, on the bidding, on the review, on the determination and decision by the deputy city manager and the manager. I guess I don't really want them to have to write a report. And I guess I'll object to the motion and more just I maybe encourage Mr. Brooks, and unless he already has, to maybe talk with staff more, and if he still feels like he needs a deeper dive, then maybe could bring it up again. But I don't really necessarily feel like I want to make staff do this at this point. So I'll object. Thanks.
I have Mayor Weldon first. Go ahead, Mayor Weldon.
I'll object also for the same reasons Mr. Smith did.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll just speak to the motion a little more. It's not like I am. There's two factors, the coverage range that's supposed to be proposed, and then also a potential savings of $500,000 a year. If there's that opportunity or potential, why wouldn't we consider that? If there's a possibility of getting a better service cheaper, how do we exercise that? And, why wouldn't we pursue that?
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Brooks. I guess just from where I sit, and again, knowing more of the history of the project and the awarding, and that it was awarded by, a procurement team for, I believe, good reason. Anyway, I understand where you're going. I just can't support the motion to make staff do a report on it, at this time. So thanks.
Mr. Steininger.
I'll object similar reasons to Mr. Smith, but I also just want to caution that when we've appropriated money for a purpose, staff follows a legal procurement process, goes through that entire process and awards a contract with a term and, all the terms of payment, of period of performance, scope of work, all of that, it sets a dangerous precedent for us to come in and second guess and name a preferred alternative contractor. It undermines some of the procurement process and the reliability of the procurement process, not just for the specific contract, but writ large for anyone doing business with the city and borough of Juneau. And if we have an issue with that, it is more appropriate to have a one-on-one conversation with staff, but taking action by this body, I think, would be inappropriate and undermine some of the kind of most fundamental institutions of public trust in how we spend money. And so I'll object to this motion.
Mr. Brooks, we've spent quite a bit on this topic now, so maybe make your comment. I'd ask you to make your comment quick. Ms. Hall.
I called the question.
We know what we're doing here. We are voting on an amendment. Ms. Wendell.
Are we ready to call roll? Okay, thank you. On the amendment to request staff review the current public Wi-Fi provider contract and bring back a report with potential alternatives. Assemblymember Brooks.
Yes.
Assemblymember Smith.
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
No.
Assemblymember Hall.
No.
Mayor Weldon.
No.
Assemblymember Steininger.
No.
Assemblymember Kelly.
No.
Chair Wall.
No.
The amendment fails, 1 7 ayes.
All right, I believe where we are is we have a marine passenger fee plan on the table. We've passed some amendments, we've failed some amendments. Mayor Weldon, do you have another amendment? Go ahead.
Exactly. So I object for purposes of an amendment, and my amendment would be to fund in the marine passenger fees, the Franklin Street dock security and restroom maintenance for $180,000, and the AJ dock facility security and maintenance for $180,000. And the reason I am doing this, I know at one time we talked about not doing it, but I think there may be legal reasons that we need to do it. So I'm very happy that Ms. Wright is on, so she could probably answer questions in that regard.
I'll object to ask Ms. Wright to speak more to that. If you if you feel like you can with that level of direction.
I do. Thank you for the question. I was asked to take a look at the question of the private docks earlier this week. So the question came up regarding the equity between private docks and the city docks and what we fund and what we don't fund. As we all know, marine passenger fee, all of these fees go towards the vessels and towards the docks, and we have a CLIA settlement. And so I did go back and take a look. I will say the CLIA settlement has a list of things that the intent is to be funded. It is not prescriptive, right? It says including but not limited to, and there are lots of things that we add or take away. We don't always agree to fund things. But in looking back at that, the restrooms and the security for all dock areas, including the private docks, are included in that first, in that settlement and in that conversation. And so I would say, you know, that there is some legal risk if we start picking and choosing between and differentiating between us and the private docks. And so we want to look at being kind of equitable and faithful to that settlement. But I also want to make clear, it is very much a policy call. And that settlement is still fairly broad. It's not prescriptive in some ways. So hopefully that gives a decent answer.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Just a question to staff as to why this wasn't included in the first place, just what your thinking was. Like if this, I see we're being advised now that there's legal risk in not doing this. So what was the reason for the original proposed budget?
I'm sorry. It looks like Manager Kester has her hand up.
I'm sure I'm just going to say the same thing. Sorry, Director Pierce, to interrupt you. Only because I had the same question and Director Pierce went back and listened to those minutes repeatedly, and the Assembly specifically designated this as a one-time expenditure. And we misremembered as well and spent a fair amount of time fact-checking that.
I'm going to ask a follow-up question because that is not the only reason that it's here. Yes, that's the reason it came back to us, but we spent a year trying to develop an equitable way to compensate both our docs and the private docs in a similar fashion. And so that is why we ultimately made the decision to do this. There was a process we went through. Is that correct? There was a theory for why these were removed.
That is correct. I'm sorry. I just felt empathy for our year-long memory. And Director Pierce does outline that in the memo and our kind of long path towards dockage fees and dockage fees being used to pay for our services that we provide, just like private businesses collect dockage fees when ships tie up to their docks, and they use those funds to pay for the services that they provide. So that is the reason, the argument for no longer including those, that passenger fee subsidy to private docks.
Thank you. Sorry for sounding annoyed. That was not directed at you all for answering that question.
And I would just sorry, Ms. Wool,
Go
if
ahead,
I could
Ms.
just
Pierce.
add for context. Part of the discussion around private docks was putting everybody, putting public and private docks on the same playing field. So the argument was to either fund all 4 docks with passenger fees for restrooms and security, or none of the 4 docks for restrooms and security. So I wanted to clarify that, because I believe the motion that's on the table right now is just for the private docks. So wanted to add that to jog your memory as you move forward in your discussion, because I did go back and listen to that meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. Ms. Hall.
And I would like to speak in support of the mayor's amendment, but if I could add the amendment to also fund our docks with the marine passenger fee funding for security and restrooms as well. So it would be across the board, everyone would be treated the same. Thank you.
I'll object for a question of staff. I guess this is related to both the original amendment and the amendment to the amendment. Do we have marine passenger fee balance to do this right now, Ms. Flick?
Thank you, Chair Wall. In this case, this would result in needing to reduce, to offset through the CWAC amount.
Can you give us a number there?
I believe we're talking about 180,000 for the 2 private docks. So 360,000 if I'm doing math in my head correctly, and another 300,000 for the CBJ dock. So it would be a total of $660,000 that would go towards the amendment and the amendment to the amendment, which we would then reduce the CWAC by that 660 if it passes.
Thank you. Mayor Weldon, do you have an objection to the amendment to the amendment? Go ahead.
Appreciate that, and I appreciate Ms. Hall bringing this forward, but we did fund our docks from the mortgage fees increase, so I think that's doable. I just don't want to leave us open for a lawsuit by not funding the other two docks at 180,000. That doesn't seem like much money to try to create goodwill amongst the docks. But I would rather not spend marine passenger fees on our own dock when we increase the rates of our docks to pay for that.
Mr. Steininger.
I'm going to speak in support of the amendment to the amendment and also ask a quick clarifying question. The marine passenger fees are more restrictive than the dockage fees that are currently used to fund our restrooms. Is that correct? So this would free up less restrictive money.
Thank you, Assemblymember Steininger. Attorney Wright may disagree with me because anything that is associated with tying a vessel to a dock falls under Constitution or something with tonnage clause, commerce, big stuff that we're not going to change. But to your point, the marine passenger fees are more restrictive because of the CLIA settlement, in my opinion, whereas the dockage fees have a little less oversight, and not that we would treat them different. And in fact, as we looked how to allocate those funds, we used the same philosophy that we do for marine passenger fees. It just doesn't carry the weight of the CLIA settlement with it.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So should this amendment to the amendment pass, we would then fund these services at CBJ docks with marine passenger fees, and then there would be 300,000 that would, I guess, because we were planning to use dockage fees to pay for those. So would their docks fund balance increase by 300,000?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Smith. Without further amendment to the proposed budget, that is correct. And I would have to go back and look at the minutes, but I believe that this body did an initial approval of the Docks and Harbors budget as presented.
Okay. I guess if we're taking away from the Seawalk, I'm kind of, I see where Ms. Hall is going. I'm kind of like, to me, I want to keep the Seawalk, as funded as we can. I do want to do these, this services at these private docks. I see why we're doing it, but I mean, if this were to pass, I'd want to use those $300,000 in dock fees to like go to the Seawalk or something. So I'm almost just wondering if it's cleaner for me to vote against this amendment to the amendment, which is what I think I will do. Thank you.
And I'm going to take the exact opposite tack of Mr. Smith because I feel exactly the opposite of him, that I will vote against the whole package when it passes because the public hates this. They do not like, they tell us a lot. They want marine passenger fees spent on things that benefit our communities. They do not like marine passenger fees going to private docks. And so the way that we dealt with that was we said, okay, we are going to not do that. We're going to let you guys fund it through your dockage fees, and we'll fund it through our dockage fees. But the reason that I'll support the amendment to the amendment is it at least makes it equal. Otherwise, they are getting their dockage fees to pay for it and marine passenger fees, and we are just using our dockage fees. So in my mind, if it passes, it makes it a little better, but I'm not going to support the the original motion, no matter how we amend it. We have an amendment to an amendment, and we have objection. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the amendment to the amendment to add $300,000 for CBJ Dock Port Access Security, which would require a reduction to the Seawalk allocation on the passenger fee proposal. Assemblymember Hall,
Yes.
Mayor Weldon,
No,
Assemblymember Smith,
No.
Assemblymember Kelly,
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
No.
Assemblymember Brooks,
No.
Assemblymember Steininger,
Yes.
Chair Wall.
Yes.
The amendment to the amendment fails, 4 ayes, 4 nays.
All right, so that brings us back to the original amendment, which is to increase the amount, or actually fund the request from the private docks. Yes, that is the amendment. Do we have objection? Mr. Kelly?
I don't think I need to speak to it. I think you might have already.
Any other comments? I'll make one more, which is that we went through a year-long process of raising dockage fees for this very reason, so that we were on an equal footing with how the private docks charge for their services, and we have done that. And I think it's the right move to keep doing it, because we are going to continue to get comments from our public that rightfully don't understand why we would be spending these funds that are supposed to be for our community to spend as we want. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I guess these are fees that are captured and paid by the passenger and do have constitutional limits on what they can be spent on, which is docks and services to the passenger. We provide them restrooms. Well, these private docks have restrooms that have to be maintained, and then there are security requirements that are imposed on them and that they need to pay for. So anyway, I hear somewhat of your argument. It has been a contentious issue. I do believe that these funds are, there is a valid reason to use these funds to pay for these services, even at a private dock. So thanks.
All right, Ms. Wendell, we have an amendment. Will you call roll? An objection, will you call roll?
Thank you. On the amendment to add Franklin and AJ Docks port security and restroom maintenance for $180,000 each, which would require a reduction to the Seawalk allocation on the passenger fee proposal. Mayor Weldon,
yes,
Assemblymember Brooks,
Yes.
Assemblymember Steininger,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hall,
Yes.
Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly,
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
No.
Chair Wall.
No.
The amendment passes, 5 ayes, 3 nays.
All right, do we have any more amendments to the marine passenger fee budget? Ms. Hall?
You're all gonna love me. Is it okay if I bring back my previous amendment? Somewhat altered. Let me go to that. I move to amend the marine passenger fee request with the addition of 75,000 for the Downtown Business Association Ambassadors Program. Ask unanimous consent, but also would direct DBA and JEDC and Travel Juneau to work together to look at the big umbrella for next year of how to best deliver these services. and ask for unanimous consent.
Mayor Weldon.
I'll object to the purposes of amendment. I think we already tried the $75,000 and it wasn't gonna work, so I will lower that number to 32,000.
Can you repeat that number?
$32,000. May I speak to it just briefly?
Yes.
The downtown ambassadors do provide a service. They even helped us at City Hall this summer. We had to call and say, could you direct passengers away from our folks downstairs so they could get their work done? So they have helped us. So I think zeroing them out would be tough. So I've halved it.
Mr. Kelly.
Actually, when I was raising my hand, she might have just answered the question. I was wondering how you came up with that number. It doesn't seem like a very round number.
I just cut it in half beside the 0.5, so 32. Or did I do my math wrong? 37. I moved it down to 37. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Okay, so we have an amendment to make the number different. Ms. Hall, I saw your
I guess
hand first.
I'm going to object to the arbitrariness of the amendment, so I'm going to object to that change.
Mr. Kelly.
I would just ask if there's anybody who we could speak to who might be able to say if that's enough to run the program. I do see we have a representative from Travel Juneau in the audience, but that may or may not, I don't know, if they may or may not be able to answer the question. Just ask if somebody could answer if that would be enough.
Well, first I'm going to see if anyone from DBA is here, and then I'm going to see if the body wants to hear from them, because it is a bit unique for us to bring somebody funded up here to answer questions. So I'm happy to do it if that's what people want. So maybe, do we have someone from DBA here before we talk about that? No. Okay, we do not. Okay, we have a motion and we have an amendment to the amendment and we have an objection. Ms. Wendell.
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the amendment to reduce the amount for the DBA Ambassador Program to 37,500. Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hall.
No.
Assemblymember Smith.
No.
Assemblymember Steininger.
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Brooks.
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly.
No.
Chair Wall.
Yes.
The amendment to the amendment passes, 5 ayes, 3 nays.
All right, so we have an amendment to a smaller number for the ambassador program and direction for folks to work together to think about the future. Any objections? Mr. Kelly.
It feels to me like I would want to get some feedback to know if this amount is going to be sufficient to fund the program before I agree to it. So I think I would add a further amendment to refer this to the pending list.
We have an amendment to the amendment to send this to the pending list. Any objections? I'll object. I don't feel like I need to speak to it, but read your packets, guys. All right. Go ahead, Ms. Wendell.
On the amendment to add $37,500 for DBA for the Downtown Business Association's Ambassador Program, with direction to have the Downtown Business Association, Travel Juneau, and the Juneau Economic Development Council work together to figure out how to deliver these services best in the future. Assemblymember Hall. Oh, apologies. I thought that passed unanimously. On the amendment to instead forward the request to the pending list. Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
No.
Assemblymember Smith.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hall.
Nope.
Mayor Weldon.
No,
Assemblymember Brooks.
No.
Assemblymember Steininger.
Yes.
Chair Wall.
No.
The amendment to the amendment fails, 3 ayes, 5 nays. 3 ayes, 5 nays.
All right, that brings us back to the motion for, what is the number, 50 to
37,500.
37,500 to DBA for the ambassador program with direction to have them work together in the future. Do we have objection? I will object, and I'm sorry for my rude comment earlier. I'm tired and all of us have a hard time processing all this information. So I take that back. I don't always read my packets fully either, or I forget things. But I am going to object to this just because, you know, I do think that our staff work hard to come up with solutions. These 3 groups have been brought together. We hired a contractor to talk about how they should work together. And I think the staff recommendation reflects that work that we've done. So I will object. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the amendment to add 37,500 for the Downtown Ambassador Program with direction to have the Downtown Business Association, Travel Juneau, and the Juneau Economic Development Council work together to figure out how to deliver these services best in the future. Assemblymember Hall.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Assemblymember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Weldon.
yes,
Assemblymember Atkinson.
No.
Assemblymember Steininger.
Yes.
Assemblymember Brooks.
Yes.
Chair Wall.
No.
The amendment as amended passes, 6 ayes, 2 nays.
All right. Do we have any more amendments to the marine passenger fee budget? Mr. Smith?
Thanks. Objecting for the purpose of a question. Ms. Pierce, at the top of your memo, page 2 of your memo, page 32 of the packet, it talks about how you're recommending like higher level of crossing guard service in FY27. And you would recommend that it would be funded at that level for the entire summer, which includes the remainder of FY26, which you're currently in. I guess I just want to be clear, to maintain that level of higher service that you recommend for FY26, we need to do an amendment to the FY26. Anyway, do we have to do anything to get that higher level of service?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. You do need to direct staff to come back with a transfer from fund balance for FY26.
Could you make that motion after we finish the FY27 process, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Just to be clean.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay,
I remove my objection.
any other changes to the FY27 marine passenger fee budget? Seeing none, that is so moved. Mr. Smith, would you try a motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the transfer of $99,728 from the Marine Passenger Fee Fund balance to increase crossing guard service for the remainder of FY '26 to a higher level. And I ask for unanimous, to the higher level recommended in FY '27, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Just looking at staff, is this legit? Is this?
I'm not going to talk about legal or illegal. Ms. Wright could do that. However, our interpretation of this motion is that staff is directed to draft an ordinance to introduce to the assembly to fund the crossing guard program in FY '26 by an additional $99,728 coming from the Marine Passenger Fee Fund balance.
Yes. That sounds great.
Any objections? Seeing none, that is so moved. All right, we are going to take a break. Good work, everybody. We did just complete one major part of our budget. Okay, good. Yeah, I think we can finish this. We have the school budget left, but just because that was a long one, I want to give people a chance to take a breather. We'll come back in 10. Need my microphone. We'll bring us back here. We are on the school district budget for action. Ms. Flick.
Thank you. This is your last action item of the night. And this one truly, truly, truly requires you to take action, moving an ordinance to the full body for action on May 18th, so that we can meet all of our required deadlines for funding the school district. So all the way back in your packet, page 72, this is somewhat similar to the conversations we've just had. The manager's proposed budget includes funding consistent with last year for above the cap. I will say, if you're thinking to yourself, wait, last week at the special meeting, didn't we do an action item? And yes, you set the minimum local funding. So if you think about that up to the cap, that's what you approved in an amount. So you can't fund less than that for education operations, probably not using the exact right words. But we do have left open for discussion would be above the cap. Similar to the CIP discussion that we had, there is one item on the service reduction list related to the school district. I included that in your memo, just so you would have it. It was related to reducing above the cap by 115,000. And so while the other ones didn't require you to take action if you didn't have an amendment, in this case, so page 72 just introduces this item. Page 73 in your packet is the page that you saw back in, I want to say March 18th-ish, that was presented to you with the joint meeting with the Board of Education and outlines what that kind of above the cap spending is. And then on page 74, you have the actual ordinance 2026-02 that needs to be forwarded to the full assembly, either as is or as amended. And I'm happy to say Superintendent Hauser is in the room. If you have questions, I'm sure he would be delighted to answer them.
Questions? Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Chairman Wall. So I'm a little confused. We're asking for 115,000 above the cap, but say it's being reduced above the cap by 115?
No, the 115,000 was a service reduction idea from April 22nd.
Oh.
So that was one of the ideas in, I don't know, your list of 40 some odd. And it just is related to this particular topic. So you will not have an opportunity to deal with it next week when you go through the service reduction list.
Any other questions? Mayor Weldon, do you have a motion for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move ordinance 2026-02, an ordinance appropriating funds from the Treasury for FY27 school district operations.
I think we know what you said, but for the record, will you say that again? It was hard to hear you.
I'll be short this time. I move ordinance serial number 2026-02 to the full assembly.
Any objections? Seeing none, that is so moved.
Chair, well, if I could, just for the minute maker, reiterate that the mayor moved ordinance 2026-02 to the full assembly, and that passed without any objections.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to our first information or item number 6 for information, fund balance. Ms. Flick.
Thank you, Chair Wool. I am presenting you with the projected ending fund balance for FY27, which you'll note the unrestricted is projected to be a negative 303. 623, that number, as you know, will likely change as you make decisions next week. The manager's proposed budget included approximately $7.5 million of operating fund balance use as the service reduction decisions were to be made by this body. And so as you work through your foregone revenue discussions next week, and as you whittle through the service reduction list next week, and also as you make decisions on May 20th, Ms. Wendell and I will be keeping kind of a running estimated fund balance list that we can share with the body, kind of play by play as you need it, as we make those decisions. You'll note at the bottom of page 76, we've got legislation that is in process. And so this projected fund balance includes the manager's proposed budget, which is not done. It also does not include the items that were approved tonight through the manager's increments. So that will have to be adjusted for those, which will reduce your projected fund balance a little bit more. It also, it has items in here that have not yet been acted on by the full assembly. And so this will change. This is information for you. And as I said, we will be tracking items as we move through the process next week and the following week, and able to assist you with understanding kind of where we are at a point in time. I would say that this is projected, as you know, as many of you have been through the budgeting process. We have a plan. That's what the budget is. It's a plan. And then we work through the reality of our year. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Questions, Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if you have the information yet or if it's something that can be provided at that later time, but now that property assessments have gone out and the appeal deadline is over, do we have a better idea of what the projected revenues will be from that?
Thank you, Assemblymember Brooks. The period in which someone may file an appeal has ended, but the disposition of those appeals is still in process. So we don't have a final resolution on all of those items yet.
Thank you. Not so much like an exact number, but just with that deadline over and seeing who might be appealing and who's not for whatever increased assessments, can we possibly get an update on those projections?
Yes, I can bring in an update as to where things are. I know we had 50-ish appeals, which is not a ton. It's not nothing, but yes, I can get you an update and the disposition of those that we have and what's in process.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have a similar one, which is about updated sales tax amount. At some point, we were gonna have, we knew we were gonna have to get through this process without final numbers for the last quarter, but we are gonna get some information. Can you give us a review of what we're going to know when? What we might know when?
Thank you, Chair Wall. That's an excellent question, one that I'm quite anxious to be able to review myself. The quarter that includes January, February, March, those sales tax reports and remittances were due on April 30th, so last Thursday. It takes our office about 2 weeks to work through all of the paper submissions and review the information and kind of close that process out. I am hopeful that at our May 20th meeting, I will be able to share an update on where we are for FY26 sales tax collection, both as we've seen kind of soft collection in general, but also this will be the first full quarter where the new exemptions are reported on. I'll just note again, these are self-reported taxes. Merchants have to put their exemptions in the right categories and report them, but we should have some data on the food exemption amount and the utility exemption amount for a full quarter. I'm hoping to be able to present that to you as an information item on May 20th.
All right, anything else on this? Sobering numbers. And these don't include the manager's increments. That's correct.
That is correct. So the actions that you took this evening are not included in this. You will have an updated version of this next week. You will also see a pending list in your packet for next week based on the items that have been moved to the pending list tonight.
Great, thank you. That brings us to budget calendar. Anything you wanted to highlight on the calendar?
I would just like to highlight that, let's see, one of the changes is for next week. As Chair Wall has mentioned, we're going to work through the foregone revenue conversation as far as we can. The service reduction conversation continuation. We did add a space in here for an Eagle Crest budget amendments. We've spent a lot of time talking about Eagle Crest in the various forms in which the 9 of you exist. And we just wanted to have space on the calendar for this body to make amendments if they so desire. So we created that space next week. And then on the 20th, we'll hope to be able to make final decisions and not have to meet on the 27th. But that will be up to the body and how we make decisions. The other item that's on the 20th is bonds, and to have kind of discussion on bond packages that you might want to see or that you want to resurrect from previous years. And so we wanted to get through the budget process before we got to that because we do have a little bit of time to get those decisions done before they end up on a ballot. I will also say that next week we will have dinner at 5 for you here in the back. So we will make sure that you are well fed and ready to make hard decisions. The plan is also to have dinner for you on the 20th so that you have 2 hard nights coming up. We want you to make sure that you're in a good space to have that. And then the last thing, Manager Kester has a quick minute when you're ready for her chair ball.
Go ahead, Manager Kester.
Thank you. This is not Finance Committee related, but it's just a small housekeeping thing since I have you all here. I wanted to let you know that there is a neighborhood meeting tomorrow evening for Phase 1 property owners for the HESCO barrier project at Thunder Mountain Middle School. It is not a public meeting. This is really a meeting for those property owners designed to answer their specific questions, and we have very limited space. We will have more public meetings in the future, but because at least one assembly member has asked to go, I would ask that you let Christina know in my office if you plan on attending so we can care for any OMA issues.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Could you remind me the time that meeting will take place?
It's at 7 p.m.
Thank you.
It's at 6. It's from 6 to 7 p.m.
On the 7th. Sorry, guys.
We're all having grace for everyone tonight. All right. I think that brings us to adjournment. Thank you, guys.